students need attention, which students need to be pulled out into groups so that they do a reteach or whatever they call it. So he just quickly needs to find out which students are need that attention. Okay, so the next thing I changed is um, they had a bunch of columns in here that were hidden because they didn't have any data in the column and they didn't want to look at them anymore. So that was actually messing with some of my calculations. So I just unhid the column um, and deleted the column since there was no data in it. And then I changed this row here is the standard that they did the CFA for. Um, and I changed that to a drop-down list. You can just, so when you go in and add a new CFA, you can just pick from the drop-down list um, what standard that CFA is for. So let's go, uh, I'm going to just go over the two common, well, the, the, the two things that you'll be doing in this spreadsheet um, on a regular basis is you're going to be adding students and you're going to be adding additional CFAs. So to add a student, all we have to do is find we can actually do it because I think these are not alphabetized, but I did notice the original one was alphabetized. So you can just pick this where you want a new line. You pick the row, you click on the box to select the row, you right click on it and you say insert one below. And that will insert a new line below here. And then I'm just going to put myself in there. So it's just by inserting a row is easily how you add a new student. And let's say I was here for this one, so we can add, I noticed that you guys were just leaving all the cells blank. If they didn't take the CFA, that works. Some people were putting in um, some text for what they would give them for that, but um, I'm just going to give myself a 3 so that it's yellow there. So that's how you would add a student to this line. Now to add another CFA, I just right click on the column, the last column, and say insert one to right, and um, it adds another column so that I can add the new CFA. So I'm just going to put in the date here. I actually had to look. And let's say there's a new standard that's not on this list, this drop-down list. Now, you guys, I did it as a drop-down list. You can continue to just type it in there. I also pivoted all of these columns. I'll show you how I did that. Um, and that was mainly because I wanted the space back. So without it pivoted, it takes up more space because this the standard text is pretty wide. And so what I did is I just highlighted the whole row, and this is kind of small, but there's this, it's a uppercase A with an arrow underneath of it, this icon here. And you hit that and you can choose how your text for this highlighted section is oriented. So um, I just turned that on its side and then selected the headers, and I found I put my mouse over one of the lines dividing the columns and just double clicked it, and it automatically resizes everything so it fits in. So that's the reason I did that, because for me, looking at this is it's easier to look at um, than if when it's wider. So let's pretend that there's a new standard. This drop down list is just made from this list right here. Um, so I have another sheet and I have all my standards on this column, and this is what the drop down list is made from. So I'm just going to add another one, RI09. And now if I go back to my spreadsheet, I can select that from my drop down list because it's been added. So then I'm just going to add some data here. And then we're just going to fill this the rest of the way down. All right, so that's just how you would add a new CFA. You do need, in order to the calculations that you guys have at the bottom, in order to get that in your new row, you do have to highlight it and just drag it over so it drags those calculations over. So, and that's pretty much, that's very close to the exact way that you guys are using this spreadsheet right now. That's pretty much the same that you're doing. I did make a different spreadsheet for each teacher. These are all ELA scores. This happened to be the one that was shared with me, happened to be the one that was shared with the principal. And so part of the problem was that you were taking all of these separate spreadsheets and putting them onto one sheet for the building principal to look at. And so that's where your duplicating of work was coming from. What I have is, and this is, so all of your teachers, you're just going to continue to record uh, your CFA scores like you normally do. And then when it comes time for the principal, for Kevin to look at it, I have a report template, and I'm just going to duplicate this sheet. And this is, so I'm going to call it by this standard. It's I09. So I.09. I'm just going to call it I09 CFA report. And right now I only have data in there for Brown, so I'm going to go in and I'm just going to create a quick report that shows me. Now what Kevin wants to know is he quickly wants to know which students need to be pulled out for reteach. And so I'm going to go in here, and I've created, this is what's called a pivot table. And I've already set up the pivot table for each, in the template for each teacher. And all I have to do is, the first data that I've added by default is just all the student names. And then I'm going to add a value to that. Wait a minute. Where's my 09?
It doesn't include it right now because if you look up top of your pivot table editor,
Oh, yes.
you'll need to adjust that to account for that extra
I,
column.
I do need to adjust it because now it goes out to 24.
The important thing to note is that teachers, you won't have to worry about that. That'll just be for whoever is managing the report data to know that if there's extra stuff that's been added, they'll be the ones increasing it.
N24. I did that wrong. So okay. So now I can add that CFA, the I09 CFA, and these are the scores that are on that table. And so then I just filter that and I say I want to show the zeros, the ones, the twos, all the threes and above are okay. So I just filtered that list. So Candace, Juan, Rudolph, and Sean are the kids in that class that got below a 3 on that CFA. So I can very quickly, I don't have to grand total it, but I can very quickly pull those kids out and build a list of kids that need to retake it. And I can grab this and just go into everybody's well, I won't do that. So here's another one that another report that I did. I did basically those same steps that I just did on this one for Brown's class, and this is actually on standard 4.r.rl.03, and you can see everybody that across fourth grade that scored below 3 on that particular CFA. I chose that one because it was the only uh, standard that every teacher tested on the both the first and second week of school. Or well, they weren't the first and second week of school. The first two tests that they gave, everybody happened to give that same test. So I chose it, and you can go down and you can see that in Joan's class, none of her kids, well, there's two, I'm sorry, there's two. Two kids scored a 0 on that CFA. And that might just be because they weren't there. Nope. Yeah. The two kids, this is the CFA, and they got a 0 because they weren't there. So I went ahead and I left them on the report because if they weren't there, they may need to be pulled out for reteach so that we can make sure that they do understand that. And then Brown, um, uh, there I am because I added myself to the class. I wasn't there that first week, so I'm a 0 too. It added it in. Um, um, and I suspect that these 2 zeros here are also because, yeah, there's 2 other students that were not there for that, or they weren't in this case. It doesn't look like they were enrolled. Holtz had one student with a 0, one that got a 1, and two that got 2 on their CFA. So you have your list of kids there. Watkins had 3 as well that need to be pulled out. Wheeler had 1, and Kramer had 1. So I think that this is something that you guys could easily